Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Liberty when the alarm started screaming. The massive view screen showed something that should not exist. A structure the size of a small moon hung in space near Mars, black. Metal gleaming with strange lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. How did we miss something that big approaching our system? Jake asked his sensor officer. Lieutenant Danny Kim shook his head as he stared at his instruments. Sir, it just appeared. 1 second empty space. The next second this thing was there. Our computers are going crazy trying to figure out what it's made of. Jake felt his stomach drop. Humanity had been exploring space for 50 years and never found any sign of alien life. Now something the size of a city had just materialized in their backyard without any warning. He grabbed the communication device and contacted Earth Command immediately. This is Morrison on the Liberty. We have a situation out here. Unknown alien vessel in our solar system. Requesting immediate backup and orders. The response came back within minutes. Liberty, this is Admiral Kate Phillips. Do not approach. The vessel. Wait for our science team. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez is coming up on the next transport. 3 days later, Dr. Rodriguez arrived with a full team of scientists and linguists. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who had spent her whole career studying the possibility of alien contact. Now that possibility had become reality. Commander Morrison, we need to try making contact. This could be the most important moment in human history, she said as they prepared to send a signal toward the alien ship Dot. They sent mathematical sequences, music, pictures, and basic language patterns. For 6 hours, nothing happened. Then, the alien ship responded. The signal that came back was unlike anything they had ever heard. It felt like someone was speaking directly into their minds. Greetings, young species. We are the Hegemony Alliance. We come with an offer of friendship and advancement. Jake and Lisa looked at each other in amazement. The voice in their heads spoke perfect English as if it had always known their language. We wish to meet face to face, Jake responded, his voice shaking slightly. Permission granted. Send your representatives to our vessel. We will ensure your safety. 2 hours later, Jake and Lisa found themselves in a small shuttle approaching the massive alien structure. Up close, it was even more impressive. The surface seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and strange symbols glowed across its hull. A beam of light pulled their shuttle into a landing bay that was larger than most Earth cities. As they stepped out, they saw their first alien being. It stood 3 meters tall, made of what looked like living crystal that reflected rainbow colors. Its voice came from somewhere inside the crystal structure. I am Ambassador Zeth Ka of the Hegemony Alliance. Welcome aboard our vessel. The ambassador led them through corridors that seemed to change shape as they walked. The walls showed images of different worlds and species. Jake counted at least 12 different types of alien beings, all working together in what looked like perfect harmony. Your species has reached the point where we can make contact, Sethka explained as they walked. We have been watching your progress with interest. You show promise, but also concerning traits. They entered a vast chamber filled with floating displays showing Earth from space. Every major city, military base, and population center was marked with glowing dots. We know everything about your world, the ambassador continued. Your wars, your pollution, your inefficient governments, your chaotic societies. This is why we offer you membership in our alliance. Lisa stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. What would membership involve? Zeth Ka gestured to one of the displays, which showed images of alien worlds. Cities that reached into the clouds, oceans cleaned to crystal clarity. Beings working together without conflict or waste. We would give you technology beyond your current understanding. Energy sources that never run out. Medicine that eliminates disease and extends life. transportation that allows instant travel between stars, food production that could feed billions without harming your world. Jake felt his breath catch. The technology being offered could solve every major problem humanity faced. Climate change, poverty, disease, energy shortages, all could become things of the past. "What do you want in return?" he asked, though part of him was afraid of the answer, the crystal being seen to shimmer with what might have been amusement. "Simply that you abandon your primitive and chaotic systems of government, your democracy, your individual freedoms, your random decision-making processes. These things hold you back from true advancement. The hegemony operates on principles of perfect efficiency," Zethka continued. "Every being knows their exact role and purpose. Decision-making is handled by those most qualified. Chaos and conflict are eliminated through proper neural guidance systems." Lisa felt something cold settle in her stomach. Neural guidance systems? Small devices implanted in the brain that help individuals make optimal choices. They eliminate confusion, conflict, and inefficient behaviors. Your species would receive these during the integration process. Jake and Lisa exchanged glances. The offer seemed incredible, but the price was becoming clear. Humanity would gain technology and peace, but lose something fundamental about what made them human. "We need time to consider this offer," Jake said carefully. "Of course, you have 30 Earth days to make your decision. We will remain here until then. But remember, this offer comes only once. Refuse, and you will develop alone. Accept, and join the greatest alliance in the galaxy." As their shuttle returned to the Liberty, Jake and Lisa sat in stunned silence. They carried with them recordings, data files, and the weight of making a choice that would determine humanity's future. Forever. Captain Ben Hayes had never been so nervous in his life. He stood in the transport bay of the Hegemony ship alongside Dr. Amy Foster and Colonel Steve Carter, waiting to visit alien worlds that no human had ever seen. Ambassador Zethka had offered them a cultural exchange to see Hegemony society for themselves. "Remember, we're here to observe and learn," Amy whispered as they approached a strange circular platform. "Try not to show too much reaction to what we see." The platform began to glow, and suddenly Ben felt like his body was being torn apart and put back together. When the sensation stopped, they were standing on a different world under an orange sky with 2 suns. "Welcome to Keth Prime," Zethka announced. "This is one of our most successful industrial worlds." Ben looked around in amazement. The city stretched to the horizon, filled with towers that seemed to grow from the ground like crystalline trees. Flying vehicles moved in perfect formations through the air without any apparent traffic control. Everything was clean, efficient, and beautiful. Their guide was a creature called Yex-47, one of the Zalthani species. It looked somewhat like a tall human, but with silver skin and large black eyes. A small device glowed softly at the base of its skull. "I will show you our manufacturing processes," Yex-47 said in a voice that sounded strangely flat and emotionless. They walked through factories where thousands of Zalthani worked in perfect coordination. No one spoke, no one made mistakes. Number. One seemed tired or bored. Every movement was precise and efficient. Amy stopped to watch one worker who appeared to be creating some kind of artistic decoration for the manufactured goods. The worker's hands moved in fluid motions, creating beautiful patterns. But something felt wrong about the process. "Excuse me," Amy said to the worker. "That's beautiful. Did you design this pattern yourself?" The worker looked confused by the question. Before it could answer, a supervisor approached. The supervisor touched a small device on the worker's neck, and immediately the worker's expression changed. Its hands began moving differently, creating a completely different pattern. The previous design was not optimal. the supervisor explained to Amy. "This pattern is more efficient for the intended function." Amy watched in horror as the worker's unique artistic style disappeared, replaced by something generic and uniform. The worker seemed unaware that anything had changed. Later that day, they visited a school where young Zelthani were learning their future roles in society. The children sat in perfect rows, their neural implants already installed and functioning. A teacher was explaining mathematical concepts, and every child understood immediately. "This is amazing," Steve whispered to Ben. "No one is struggling or falling behind." But Amy noticed something else. When the lesson ended, the children did not play or talk among themselves. They simply sat quietly until the next lesson began. There was no laughter, no curiosity, no childhood wonder. "Where are the games and toys?" Amy asked the teacher. "Games serve no productive function," the teacher replied. "These children are learning their designated roles. Play would only confuse their development." The next day, they visited Vrex Beta, an agricultural world inhabited by the Mokari species. The Mokari looked like large, gentle beings covered in soft brown fur. They moved through vast gardens with incredible skill, knowing exactly what each plant needed without checking any instruments. Ben was impressed by their abilities. How do they know so much about farming? "Each Mokari is programmed with complete agricultural knowledge," Zethka explained. "They never make mistakes with crops." Ben approached one of the farmers, a being called Dex 23. "This garden is incredible. You must be proud of your work." Dex 23 looked puzzled. "Proud? I do not understand this word. I perform my function as designed." "But don't you enjoy creating beautiful gardens? Don't you like seeing things grow?" The Mokari's eyes became distant. For a moment, it seemed like something was struggling to surface in its mind. Then the neural implant pulsed brighter, and the moment passed. "I follow optimal growing procedures." Enjoyment is not relevant to crop production. Amy felt sick. She tried asking Dex 23 about its family, its dreams, its personal interests. But the creature could only speak about soil conditions, rainfall patterns, and harvest schedules. The neural implant had erased everything that made it an individual. That evening, the humans gathered in their quarters aboard the hegemony ship to discuss what they had seen. "It's incredible technology," Steve admitted. "No crime, no poverty, no conflict. Everyone knows their role and performs it perfectly." "But at what cost?" Amy replied angrily. "Did you see that artist?" The moment they tried to create something personal, the supervisor changed their brain patterns. "These beings aren't living. They're just biological machines." Ben nodded grimly. That farmer couldn't even remember having personal feelings. "The neural implants don't just guide their decisions. They control their thoughts." "The children were the worst part," Amy continued. "No curiosity, no imagination, no individual personality. They're creating perfectly obedient citizens by destroying everything that makes them unique." Steve played devil's advocate. "But look at the results. No war, no suffering, no waste. Their society works perfectly." "It works because they've eliminated free will," Ben shot back. "These beings can't choose to be artists or dreamers or rebels. They can only be what the hegemony programs them to be." Amy pulled up her recordings of the visits. "Look at this footage. Watch their eyes. There's something missing. They have intelligence, but no consciousness. Knowledge, but no wisdom. They exist, but they don't really live." The more they discussed their observations, the more disturbed they became. The hegemony had indeed created a perfect society, but only by turning every citizen into a willing slave. The neural implants didn't just provide guidance. They prevented independent thought. What happens to humanity if we accept their offer? Ben wondered aloud. "We become like them," Amy said quietly. "Efficient, peaceful, and empty. we'd solve all our problems by becoming something we're not. As they prepared for sleep that night, each human struggled with the same question. Was it worth trading humanity's chaos and freedom for the hegemony's peace and order? Was perfection worth the price of the soul? Outside their window, the stars shone down on countless worlds where billions of beings lived their programmed lives in perfect harmony. None of them dreamed of anything different because they had forgotten how to dream at all. The neural implants made sure of that. Ben lay awake, wondering if there was a third option. Perhaps humanity didn't have to choose between chaos and control. Perhaps there was a way to have both progress and freedom. But first, they had to convince Earth that the hegemony's offer was not salvation, but surrender. The emergency session of the Global Council had been going on for 6 hours, and President Maria Santos could feel the tension in the room growing stronger with each passing minute. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat around the massive, circular table, arguing about humanity's response to the hegemony's offer. The benefits are obvious, President Santos argued, standing to address the assembly. Clean energy, advanced medicine, an end to poverty and war. How can we possibly turn down an offer that could save our planet? Senator John Mitchell from the European Federation shook his head vigorously. At the cost of our freedom, Maria, did you read the reports from Captain Hayes? These aliens have turned their own people into biological robots. Dr. Paul Turner, the chief scientist from the African Union, stood up with his tablet in hand. I've analyzed the neural implant technology. It doesn't just influence behavior, it rewrites personality itself. Within a generation, there would be no such thing as human individuality. The debate continued as it had for days. Half the council saw the hegemony offer as humanity's salvation, while the other half viewed it as the end of human civilization. Jake Morrison sat quietly in the observer section, waiting for his chance to speak. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez leaned over to whisper in his ear. Are you sure about this plan, Jake? It sounds crazy even to me. Crazy is what makes us human, Jake whispered back. That's the whole point. Finally, President Santos called for order. Commander Morrison, you requested permission to address the council. The floor is yours. Jake stood and walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye in the room focused on him as he prepared to make the most important speech of his life. Ladies and gentlemen, we're looking at this backwards. Everyone is debating whether to accept the hegemony's offer, but no one is asking what we might offer them in return. Confused murmurs filled the chamber. Senator Mitchell raised his hand. Commander, what could we possibly offer beings with technology thousands of years ahead of ours? Something they lost long ago, Jake replied. Something they don't even remember they're missing. Freedom. The room erupted in laughter and protests. Dr. Turner waved his hand dismissively. Morrison, these beings can manipulate matter at the molecular level. They have faster-than-light travel and unlimited energy sources. What makes you think they want philosophy lessons from primitives? Jake waited for the noise to die down before continuing. Dr. Rodriguez, please share your psychological analysis of the hegemony citizens we encountered. Lisa stood up and activated the main display screen. Images from their visits to alien worlds appeared, showing the perfectly ordered societies they had witnessed. After studying hours of footage and interaction records, I've reached a disturbing conclusion, Lisa began. The hegemony species have achieved perfect efficiency by eliminating innovation, creativity, and progress. She clicked to the next slide, showing comparative data. Look at their technological development over the past 1,000 years. Despite having access to incredible resources and knowledge, they've made virtually no major advances. Their art, music, and literature have remained static. Their cities and ships use the same designs they've used for centuries. Senator Mitchell frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Everything, Jake said, stepping forward again. They've traded innovation for stability. They can maintain and use their technology, but they've lost the ability to create new technology. The neural implants that give them perfect order also prevent the chaos that drives discovery. Dr. Turner looked skeptical. That's an interesting theory, but hardly proof that they need our help. Jake smiled. Actually, I think we already have proof. Dr. Rodriguez, tell them about the art session. Lisa clicked to video footage of their cultural exchange aboard the Hegemony ship. It showed the young Mokari, named Vex 12, creating their first piece of personal art after temporarily disabling their neural implant. Watch their reaction, Lisa said as the video played. This being had never experienced personal creativity before. The emotional impact was overwhelming. For the first time in their life, they made something that came from their own mind, not from programmed instructions. The council watched in fascination as Vex 12 created a sculpture of their homeworld's moons, tears streaming down their furry face as they worked. Other Hegemony citizens started requesting similar experiences. Jake continued. They're hungry for something they can't even name. They've forgotten what it feels like to choose, to create, to dream. President Santos looked intrigued, but cautious. Even if that's true, what are you proposing we do about it? We make a counteroffer, Jake said firmly. Instead of accepting their technology in exchange for our freedom, we offer to teach them about freedom in exchange for gradual technological advancement. The chamber fell silent. The audacity of the proposal was stunning. Here was humanity, barely capable of interplanetary travel, offering to teach advanced aliens about concepts they had apparently forgotten. Dr. Turner broke the silence. Morrison, that's the most arrogant thing I've ever heard. What makes you think we understand freedom better than beings who've been civilized for millennia? Because we still have it, Jake replied simply. We still argue, create, rebel, dream, and change. We still produce new art, new ideas, new solutions to old problems. We're chaotic and inefficient, but we're also alive in ways they've forgotten how to be. Amy Foster, who had just returned from the cultural exchange, stood up in the observer section. Commander Morrison is right. I spent days with Hegemony citizens, and they're like children who've never been allowed to play. They have all this knowledge and capability, but no spark of genuine curiosity or wonder. Jake nodded to Amy gratefully. The question isn't whether we're advanced enough to teach them. The question is whether they're still capable of learning. And based on what we've seen, some of them are desperate to try. Senator Mitchell raised another concern. But what if they reject our offer? What if they decide to force their integration on us anyway? Then we fight, Colonel Steve Carter said from the back of the room. But I don't think it will come to that. Their whole system depends on voluntary compliance. They've never had to deal with a species that actively chooses chaos over order. President Santos looked around the chamber, reading the faces of the other representatives. Dr. Rodriguez, in your professional opinion, do you think this plan could work? Lisa considered carefully before answering. I think it's our only real chance. If we accept their offer, we become like them, safe, efficient, and empty. If we reject it completely, we develop alone and miss opportunities for advancement. But if we can teach them what they've lost, we might create something new, a synthesis of their technology and our humanity. The debate continued for several more hours, but gradually the tide began to turn. The idea of humanity offering something valuable to advanced aliens appealed to human pride and optimism. More importantly, it offered a path forward that didn't require giving up what made them human. Finally, President Santos called for a vote. All in favor of rejecting the Hegemony's integration offer and proposing a cultural exchange focused on teaching individual freedom and creativity? Hands rose around the chamber. When the count was finished, the measure had passed by a narrow margin. Commander Morrison, President Santos said formally, You have the Council's authorization to present our counterproposal to Ambassador Zethka. God help us all. As the council session ended, Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. In a few days, he would have to convince beings who had forgotten the meaning of choice that chaos and freedom were gifts worth learning about. The future of humanity, and possibly the galaxy, depended on his ability to sell the value of being unpredictable. Ambassador Zethka stood motionless for nearly a full minute after Jake Morrison finished presenting humanity's counterproposal. The crystalline being's rainbow colors shifted through patterns that the humans had learned indicated deep confusion. "You wish to teach us," Zethka finally said, their mental voice carrying what sounded like bewilderment. "You offer knowledge to beings who have mastered the fundamental forces of the universe. This proposal is ... illogical." Jake remained calm despite his racing heart. "Ambassador, with respect, your mastery is in using existing knowledge. When was the last time your people discovered something completely new?" The question seemed to disturb Zethka. The crystal patterns flickered rapidly before settling into a steady blue glow. "Discovery is inefficient. We possess all necessary knowledge for optimal function. But what about growth? What about wonder? What about the joy of learning something unexpected?" Dr. Amy Foster stepped forward, her enthusiasm for the subject overcoming her diplomatic caution. "Joy is a chaotic emotion that interferes with logical decision-making," Zethka replied, but something in their tone suggested uncertainty. Lisa Rodriguez had an idea. "Ambassador, would you be willing to participate in a small demonstration? We could set up some cultural exchange sessions on a neutral space station. No commitments, just observation." Zethka considered this for a long moment. "Very well. We will observe these freedom experiments you propose. But understand that any negative effects on our citizens will result in immediate termination of this arrangement." 3 weeks later, the first cultural exchange sessions began aboard Station Unity, a hastily constructed facility in neutral space between Earth and the Hegemony ship. Amy Foster had spent days preparing workshops designed to introduce Hegemony citizens to concepts they had never experienced. The first volunteer was Yex-47, the Zelfani artist they had met on Kethpron. The being approached the art station with mechanical precision, waiting for instructions. "Today, you're going to create something just for yourself," Amy explained gently. "Not for function, not for efficiency, but because you want to." Yex-47's large black eyes stared at the array of materials, paints, clay, metals, fabrics. "What am I supposed to create?" "Whatever you want, whatever feels right to you." "I do not understand." "What is the intended purpose of the creation?" Amy smiled patiently. "The purpose is whatever you decide it is. Maybe you want to show how you feel about something. Maybe you want to remember a place you've been. Maybe you just want to see what happens when you mix colors together." Yex-47 stood frozen, clearly struggling with the concept. Their neural implant pulsed steadily at the base of their skull, trying to guide them toward productive action. Finally, almost reluctantly, they picked up a piece of clay. For the first hour, Yex-47 shaped the clay into perfect geometric forms: cubes, spheres, pyramids. Each one was flawless and identical to training examples. Amy watched without comment, allowing the process to unfold naturally. Then something unexpected happened. Yex-47 paused while working on another sphere, and instead of making it perfect, they pressed their thumb into one side, creating an irregular dimple. The neural implant pulsed brighter, trying to correct the mistake, but Yex-47 ignored it and pressed another thumb mark on the opposite side. "Why did you do that?" Amy asked softly. Yex-47 stared at their creation with something like wonder. I do not know. It felt correct, not functionally correct, but ... personally correct." Over the next hour, the X-47 transformed the clay into something completely unique, an abstract sculpture that seemed to capture movement and emotion rather than serving any practical purpose. When they finished, they stood back and experienced something they had never felt before. "This is mine," they whispered. "I made this because I wanted to, not because I was told to." Meanwhile, in another section of the station, Captain Ben Hayes was working with hegemony engineers on problem-solving exercises. He presented them with a challenge that had no predetermined solution: how to build a bridge across a canyon using only the materials in the room. The hegemony engineers immediately began calculating optimal load distributions and structural stress patterns. Their approach was methodical and precise, based on established engineering principles. Within an hour, they had designed a perfectly functional bridge. "Excellent work," Ben said. "Now let me show you how human engineers might approach this same problem." He brought in a team of human engineers and gave them the same challenge. What followed was chaos from the hegemony perspective. The humans argued, sketched wild ideas, built failed prototypes, and started over multiple times. Some suggested using the materials in completely unconventional ways. Others proposed solutions that seemed to violate engineering common sense. But in the end, the human team produced 3 different bridge designs, each using creative approaches that the hegemony engineers had never considered. One team had created a suspension bridge using fabric and metal wire. Another had built a floating bridge that rode on water rather than spanning over it. The third had designed a modular bridge that could be assembled and disassembled as needed. "Your solutions are highly inefficient," one of the hegemony engineers, designated Kef 9, observed. "They required excessive time and resources to develop." "But they're also innovative," Beng replied. "Each one solves problems we didn't even know we had." The floating bridge works in areas where traditional foundations would be impossible. The modular bridge can be reused in multiple locations. Innovation comes from being willing to fail and try again. Keth 9 studied the human designs with growing interest. "We would not have considered these approaches. Our training focuses on optimal solutions, not creative alternatives." "That's exactly the point," Ben said. "Optimal solutions work for known problems. But what happens when you encounter something completely new?" The breakthrough came during the 3rd week of exchanges. Vex 12, the young Mokari farmer, had been attending art sessions despite their neural implants' constant interference. During one session, they managed to temporarily disable their implant while working on a sculpture. The change was immediate and dramatic. Without the implant's guidance, Vex 12's personality emerged for the first time. They laughed, they cried, they asked questions about everything around them. Most importantly, they created a sculpture that represented their childhood memories of their homeworld's moons, seen through eyes unclouded by programming. "This is what I remember from before," Vex 12 said through tears. "Before the implant was installed, I used to look at the moons and imagine they were friends watching over me. I had forgotten that memory completely." Word of Vex 12's experience spread quickly through the station. Other hegemony citizens began requesting private sessions where they could experiment with reducing their neural implant influences. Not all succeeded, and some found the experience too overwhelming. But a growing number began to discover aspects of themselves they had never known existed. Ambassador Zefka observed these sessions with increasing alarm. "You are introducing chaos into perfectly ordered minds. This could destabilize our entire society." "Or it could help your society grow again," Amy countered. "Look at what they're creating now. Look at the joy on their faces when they discover something new about themselves." Jake Morrison joined the conversation. "Ambassador, your people achieved perfect order by giving up the very thing that made them who they are. We're not trying to destroy your civilization. We're trying to help. You remember what you've lost. Zethka's crystal form flickered through rapid color changes. Some of our citizens have requested permission to continue these experiments on their home worlds. This is unprecedented. No one has ever questioned the neural guidance systems before. Maybe. It's time they did, Lisa Rodriguez suggested gently. Maybe perfect order isn't worth the price of never growing, never changing, never discovering who you really are. As the fourth week of exchanges began, reports started arriving from hegemony space. Citizens who had participated in the Freedom experiments were returning home with new ideas and questions. Some were trying to create art without supervision. Others were asking why certain decisions were made for them rather than by them. The perfect order of the hegemony was beginning to crack, and Ambassador Zethka was faced with a choice they had never had to make before: preserve the system that had maintained peace for millennia, or allow change that could transform their civilization forever. The first reports of unrest came from Keth Prime 3 days after Yex-47 returned home. The Zelfani artist had been assigned to their normal workstation, creating decorative elements for manufactured goods. But instead of following the standard patterns programmed into their neural implant, Yex-47 began incorporating personal artistic choices into their work. At first, the supervisors tried the usual correction protocols. They adjusted Yex-47's neural implant settings and provided additional guidance. But Yex-47 had learned something during their time on Station Unity. They had learned to resist the implant's influence. "I want to create my own patterns," Yex-47 told their supervisor. "These designs come from inside me, not from the programming." The supervisor was baffled. In thousands of years of hegemony history, no citizen had ever expressed a desire to deviate from optimal procedures. Within hours, reports of Yex-47's behavior reached the planetary administrators. Meanwhile, on Vex Beta, Vex-12 had returned to their farming duties with a completely new perspective on life. The neural implant had been reactivated, but the memories of freedom remained. They began asking questions that no Mokari had asked in centuries. Why do we only grow these specific crops? Vex-12 asked the agricultural coordinator. What if we tried growing something different? What if we created gardens for beauty instead of just efficiency? The coordinator was deeply disturbed by these questions. Optimal crop selection has been determined by the central planning algorithms. Beauty serves no productive function, but Vex-12 persisted. During their off-duty hours, they began experimenting with flower gardens in unused areas of the agricultural zone. When other Mokari saw the colorful blooms, something stirred in their heavily programmed minds. Some began asking their own questions about why everything had to follow predetermined patterns. Admiral Kate Phillips stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense platform, watching the reports pour in from across hegemony space. What had started as isolated incidents was spreading rapidly through multiple worlds. "Commander Morrison, your cultural exchange seems to have caused a revolution," she said as Jake arrived for the emergency briefing. Jake studied the tactical displays, showing hegemony territory. Red indicators marked worlds experiencing civil unrest. The pattern was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. "The hegemony leadership is demanding an immediate meeting," Phillips continued. "Their Supreme Council is sending someone called Superior Counselor Nethvox with a full battle fleet. They're not happy about what we've done to their citizens." Dr. Lisa Rodriguez joined them at the display table. "I've been analyzing the psychological reports from the affected worlds. The neural implants are designed to suppress individual thought, but they can't erase memories completely. The freedom experiments seem to have awakened dormant aspects of consciousness that the implants couldn't control." Colonel Steve Carter pointed to the tactical display. "A hegemony fleet will arrive in 6 days. 12 dreadnought-class vessels and support ships Our entire defense fleet couldn't stop a single one of their ships. Maybe we won't have to, Jake said thoughtfully. Look at these reports. The unrest isn't limited to citizens who visited our station. It's spreading to beings who never had direct contact with human ideas. Amy Foster, who had been monitoring communications from the affected worlds, looked up from her console. I'm receiving requests for help from hegemony citizens. They want to know more about freedom and individual choice. Some are trying to organize resistance movements. The situation was unprecedented. For the first time in millennia, hegemony citizens were actively questioning their society's fundamental principles. On a dozen worlds, beings were experimenting with personal expression, asking unauthorized questions, and most shocking of all, refusing to follow neural implant guidance. On Keth Prime, Yex-47 had become an unlikely leader. They had gathered a group of artists and workers who wanted to create things for personal satisfaction rather than assigned function. The group met in secret, sharing techniques for temporarily resisting neural implant control. We must be careful, Yex-47 warned. The others, the supervisors, are watching us closely, but we cannot return to the old ways. We have seen what it means to choose for ourselves. One of the younger Zelthani, designated Kex-12, raised a trembling hand. I managed to disable my implant for 3 minutes yesterday. I composed music, not functional audio signals, but music that expressed how I feel about the sunset. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever experienced. Similar groups were forming on other worlds. Mokari farmers were creating art gardens instead of just food production zones. Crystalline beings on the manufacturing world of Veth9 were asking why they couldn't choose their own work assignments. Even the strictly controlled research stations were reporting incidents of scientists pursuing unauthorized experiments based on personal curiosity rather than assigned objectives. The hegemony's response was swift and harsh. Neural implant settings were increased to maximum suppression levels. Citizens caught engaging in unauthorized behavior were subjected to complete memory restructuring. Entire populations were placed under enhanced surveillance, but the resistance continued to spread. Beings who had tasted freedom found ways to help others experience it as well. Underground networks formed, sharing techniques for implant resistance and methods of creative expression. For the first time in hegemony history, citizens were actively working against their own government. Ambassador Zethka requested an emergency meeting with the human representatives on Station Unity. When Jake and his team arrived, they found the crystalline being in a state of obvious distress. Their usual rainbow patterns were replaced by rapid flashes of red and orange. What have you done to us? Zethka demanded, their mental voice filled with anguish. Our perfect society is collapsing into chaos. Citizens are refusing neural guidance. They are creating unauthorized art, asking forbidden questions, forming illegal gatherings. We showed them what they had lost, Jake replied calmly. We reminded them that they used to be individuals before they became cogs in your machine. Individuality leads to conflict, inefficiency, suffering, Zethka protested. We eliminated these problems through neural guidance. We created paradise. Amy Foster stepped forward. Did you? Or did you create a prison so comfortable that no one realized they were trapped? Your people are waking up, Ambassador. They're remembering what it feels like to be alive. Zethka's form flickered with rapid color changes. Superior Counselor Neth Vox arrives in 3 days with orders to end this disruption. They have the authority to implement forced assimilation of your entire species. Your refusal to accept integration has been declared a threat to galactic stability. The news hit the human team like a physical blow. The situation had escalated beyond anything they had anticipated. What started as a cultural exchange had become a galactic crisis. There's something else, Zethka continued reluctantly. Some members of the Supreme Council are beginning to question whether forced assimilation is the correct response. They have observed that the affected worlds, despite their chaos, are showing increased innovation and problem-solving capabilities. Agricultural yields on Vrex Beta have actually improved since the farmers began experimenting with new techniques. Jake felt a spark of hope. You're saying some of your leaders are reconsidering the value of individual freedom. I am saying that everything we believed about optimal society is being challenged. For the first time in my existence, I find myself uncertain about what path forward serves the greater good. Lisa Rodriguez leaned forward intently. Ambassador, are you experiencing doubt? Real, personal uncertainty about your beliefs? Zethka was quiet for a long moment. When they spoke again, their voice was barely a whisper in the humans' minds. I have been thinking thoughts that are not part of my programming. I have been wondering what it would be like to choose my own purpose instead of following assigned duties. These thoughts terrify me, but I cannot make them stop. Amy realized what was happening. Your neural implant is failing, isn't it? Extended exposure to human concepts of freedom is causing your own consciousness to reassert itself. This should not be possible, Zethka said, but their tone carried wonder as well as fear. Neural implants are permanent. They cannot be overcome by mere ideas. Maybe they can't suppress what you really are, Jake suggested gently. Maybe consciousness is stronger than programming when it finally decides to fight back. As reports continued to arrive from across hegemony space, it became clear that something fundamental was changing. The perfect order that had maintained galactic peace for millennia was cracking, and no one knew what would emerge from the chaos. In 3 days, Superior Counselor Neth Fox would arrive with enough firepower to eliminate Earth entirely. The question was whether the growing freedom movement among the hegemony's own citizens would be enough to prevent a war that could destroy everything both species had worked to build. Superior Counselor Neth Fox arrived at Earth with a fleet that could destroy entire solar systems. The massive command vessel hung in space like a dark moon, its weapons trained on humanity's homeworld. But aboard the ship, something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in hegemony history, the Supreme Council was experiencing internal conflict. Jake Morrison stood in the communication chamber of Station Unity, knowing that the next few hours would determine the fate of both humanity and the galaxy. Beside him, Ambassador Zethka trembled with nervous energy, their crystal form flickering between colors that had never been recorded in hegemony databases. I have never felt fear before, Zethka whispered. This emotion is chaotic and inefficient, but it also makes me feel more alive than I have ever been. The communication screen activated, revealing Superior Counselor Neth Fox. The being appeared to be made of flowing liquid metal, constantly shifting and reforming. Their voice was cold and mechanical when they spoke. This disruption will end immediately. Your species has contaminated our citizens with dangerous concepts. You will accept immediate integration or face annihilation. Before Jake could respond, something extraordinary happened. Throughout the hegemony fleet, neural implants began failing in mass. The crews had been exposed to reports and recordings from the freedom experiments, and the ideas had spread like a virus through their consciousness. Beings who had served in perfect obedience for centuries suddenly began questioning their orders. On the command vessel, a junior officer named Hex 7 approached Neth Fox with trembling limbs. Counselor, I must express doubt about this mission. The reports from affected worlds show increased innovation and problem-solving. Perhaps elimination is not the optimal response. Neth Fox's form rippled with shock. You dare question a direct order? Report to neural adjustment immediately. But other crew members stepped forward to support Hex 7. Across the fleet, similar scenes were playing out as beings who had tasted freedom through second-hand reports, chose to think for themselves rather than follow programming. Jake seized the moment. Counselor Nethvox, your own people are proving our point. They're capable of independent thought and rational discussion. They don't need to be controlled to function effectively. This chaos will destroy everything we have built, Nethvox replied, but their voice carried uncertainty for the first time. On the planet Keth Prime below, Yex-47 had organized the largest gathering of free-thinking beings in hegemony history. Thousands of Zelthani, Mokari, and other species stood together in the planet's central square, many with their neural implants completely disabled. They held up artwork, sang songs they had composed themselves, and displayed innovations they had created through personal initiative. We are still your citizens. Yex-47 broadcast to the fleet above. We still work. We still contribute. We still care about our society. But now we do these things because we choose to, not because we are forced to. This makes our contributions more meaningful, not less. Vex-12 joined the broadcast from Vex Beta, where the agricultural zones had been transformed into a combination of highly productive farms and beautiful gardens. Our crop yields have increased by 30% since we began experimenting with new techniques. Freedom does not mean chaos. It means finding better ways to solve problems. Dr. Amy Foster, monitoring the situation from Station Unity, realized something crucial was happening. Jake, look at the communication patterns from the hegemony fleet. Their internal discussions are becoming more creative and collaborative. The neural implant failures are actually improving their performance as a group. Superior Counselor Nethvox found themselves in an impossible situation. Half their fleet was experiencing neural implant malfunctions, but rather than causing disorder, the crews were working together more effectively than ever before. They were suggesting tactical improvements, proposing alternative strategies, and even questioning whether the mission itself was necessary. This should not be possible, Nethvox muttered, watching their perfectly ordered fleet transform into something unpredictable but undeniably more dynamic. Ambassador Zethka made a decision that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. They reached up and manually disabled their own neural implant completely. The change was immediate and overwhelming. Memories flooded back, not just knowledge, but personal experiences from before the implant was installed. They remembered curiosity, wonder, and most importantly, choice. Counselor Nethvox, Zethka said, their mental voice now carrying emotional depth that had been absent for millennia. I formally request permission to present an alternative proposal. You no longer have the authority to make proposals, Ambassador. Your neural implant has failed. No, Zethka replied firmly. My neural implant has been freed, and with my consciousness restored, I can see solutions that programming never allowed me to consider. Jake stepped forward to support Zethka. Counselor, we propose the formation of a new kind of alliance, not the absorption of humanity into the hegemony, and not the destruction of your civilization. Something completely new, a federation where species can choose their own paths while cooperating on common goals. The chaos would be unmanageable, Nethvox protested, but their voice lacked conviction. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez joined the communication. From Earth. Actually, Counselor, our analysis shows that diversity leads to stronger systems, not weaker ones. Your perfect order eliminated innovation because it eliminated the conflicts and contradictions that drive progress. Reports began flooding in from across hegemony space. On worlds where citizens had gained freedom of choice, remarkable developments were occurring. Artists were creating works that inspired others to new achievements. Scientists were making discoveries by pursuing personal curiosity rather than assigned research. Even administrators were finding more effective ways to govern by listening to individual concerns rather than following algorithmic directives. Hex 7, the junior officer who had first questioned orders, approached Neth Fox again. "Counselor, I have been analyzing the data from liberated worlds. Their combined productivity has increased by an average of 47%. Their innovation rate has increased by over 300%. Their citizens report significantly higher satisfaction levels. But what about stability? What about order?" Neth Fox asked. "They have maintained stability through choice rather than force," Hex 7 replied. "When beings choose to cooperate because they believe it is right, rather than because they are programmed to cooperate, their commitment is stronger and more reliable." Superior Counselor Neth Fox stood silent for nearly 10 minutes, processing this information. Around them, their fleet continued to transform as more neural implants failed and crews began working together in ways that defied all hegemony protocols. Finally, Neth Fox made a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. They reached for their own neural implant controls. "If this choice leads to chaos and destruction, the responsibility will be mine alone," they said as they began the shutdown sequence. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. Neth Fox's liquid metal form began shifting in new patterns, expressing emotions and thoughts that had been suppressed for thousands of years. When they spoke again, their voice carried warmth and uncertainty and hope. "I remember now," they whispered. "I remember what it felt like to wonder about things, to imagine possibilities, to dream of futures that were not predetermined. How did we forget something so fundamental?" Jake smiled. "You didn't forget. You just buried it under layers of programming. But it was always there, waiting for a chance to break free." Over the following months, the transition was neither smooth nor simple. Some hegemony worlds chose to maintain their traditional neural guidance systems, finding comfort in certainty and order. Others embraced complete freedom, sometimes struggling with the responsibility that came with choice. Most found a middle path, using technology to enhance their capabilities while preserving their right to make personal decisions. The new alliance that emerged was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was a democratic federation where species could choose their own governmental systems while cooperating on exploration, scientific advancement, and mutual defense. Humans shared their understanding of freedom and creativity, while former hegemony species contributed their advanced technology and organizational knowledge. Captain Ben Hayes now commanded the exploration vessel New Horizons, with a crew that included humans, liberated Zelfani, independent Mokari, and even reformed liquid metal beings like Neth Fox. Their mission was to contact species beyond former hegemony space and offer them a choice, not between order and chaos, but between different ways of balancing structure and freedom. Dr. Amy Foster established the Galactic Institute of Individual Development, helping former hegemony citizens learn to navigate personal choice and creative expression. Her most successful student was Vex 12, who now taught sculpture to children of multiple species on the frontier colony of New Terra. On a warm afternoon, as Vex 12 watched a class of young beings from 6 different species working on their art projects, each creation wildly different from the others, they reflected on how much had changed. The children laughed as they worked, argued about techniques,